We assume the collapse of a man happens in a sudden, catastrophic event. It doesn't. It is a slow burn synaptic fragmentation, triggered by the blue light glare of a smartphone while your breakfast goes cold. It is the subtle surrender to digital numbing before the day has even begun. Destruction is a quiet behavior. It is the biological insolvency of sitting before a television, night after night as the kilos settle into your frame, and the fire in your gut turns to ash. You are not dying. You are drifting into a state of metabolic stagnation. You suffer from a declarative-action gap. You circle Sunday for the gym, a brief surge of dopamine-fueled hope. But by Wednesday, you have negotiated with your own mediocrity. Every crossed-out date is a micro-rupture in your personal integrity. Look at the faces on the morning train. This isn't laziness. It is systemic neural resignation. They have attempted to climb so many times and slipped that the brain now perceives effort as a threat. They are not unwilling. They are just profoundly, spiritually tired. You find yourself sitting in the Commodore outside Woolies, the engine ticking as it cools. The threshold awareness hits you here in the suburban quiet. You realize you are living a life of default settings, waiting for a permission slip that is never coming. He's not processing nutrients. He's initiating a dopaminergic bypass. It's the 10-minute prefrontal shutdown in a Woolies car park, the only time the noise in his head finally hits 0 decibels. We call it the Great Escape, not from a prison, but from the weight of being. It's not the sugar or the salt, it's the addictive relief of cognitive avoidance. Life doesn't implode during the crisis. It evaporates during the quiet drift. This is the terminal apathy zone where the delta between who you are and who you were becomes an unbridgeable chasm. Identity fossilization is a silent killer. You look at that old footy jersey, feel the fabric strain, and you sign the surrender script. This is just who I am now. The internal standards haven't just slipped, they've expired. Christopher, 40 years on the clock, carrying 30 kilos of physiologic debt. He's home, but he's ghosting his own life. The light is on, but the neural architecture is dormant. Observe the architecture of industrial inertia. Christopher is the martyr of the suburban grind, sacrificing his cellular vitality for the machinery of production. Modernity praises this slow suicide, calling it reliability, while his nervous system screams in a frequency of absolute exhaustion. The meat pie is not sustenance. It is a dopaminergic dampener. He stands in the fluorescent hollow of his kitchen, engaging in nutrient-void caloric intake to quiet the internal alarm. His children sleep nearby, yet he exists in a different temporal plane of isolation. Weekends are no longer a celebration of life. They are clinical recovery sessions for his cortisol-wrecked anatomy. He is locked in a state of digital anesthesia beer, scrolling, and a heavy suburban silence that serves as a tomb for his remaining ambition. His body used to whisper its decline, now it bellows. Tying his work boots is a feat of mechanical defiance. His kinetic chain is failing, his proprioception is blunted, and the simple stairs to his bedroom have become a mountain range of physiologic debt. The glass of the window is the threshold of his paternal failure. He watches his kids kick a footy in the backyard, but the distance between him and the grass is an unbridgeable chasm of dopaminergic bankruptcy. He didn't just not feel like it. He had lost the neural map to joy. The most brutal metric of failure isn't your bank balance or your waistline. It's the silent withdrawal of a child who has mapped your unavailability. She held the footy, hesitated, and then pivoted, choosing the lonely veranda over your hollowed-out presence. Children are expert cartographers of the soul. They learn to navigate around your emotional drought, treating your presence like a structural hazard in their world. They don't rebel. They simply adapt to your absence while you're still in the room. In that glance, Christopher saw the epigenetic tax being levied in real time. She wasn't angry. She was simply recalibrating her expectations to survive his metabolic bankruptcy. That small disappointment is a toxin that hardens into a lifelong barrier. He'd tried the performative surges before, the dopamine-driven overreaches, midnight cardio sessions fueled by loud videos and the frantic purging of the pantry. All fire, no hearth. Every aggressive attempt was just another high-interest loan he couldn't service. He collapsed by a green letterbox, 3 blocks from home. Another grand gesture hemorrhaging into the pavement. He wasn't just out of breath, he was out of integrity. The cycle of furious intensity and crushing shame had become his only consistent behavior. The Saturday sun acts as a biothermal auditor. It exposes every structural weakness in the suburban sprawl. Today, the audit begins in the backyard. A high-velocity arc. The Sharon clears the corrugated iron. That's a total loss of kinetic control, a breach of the perimeter, and a sudden demand on my depleted physical reserves. Initiating a standard recovery protocol. Descending into the damp soil to reclaim the asset. But as I reach out, the central nervous system hits an internal firewall. This isn't a cramp. It's a complete biomechanical bankruptcy. My glutes and lower lumbar have officially filed for Chapter 11. I am stuck in a state of total functional deficit, the ultimate ego dissolution. My son records the data of my failure through a gap in the fence, while the neighbor, a man 20 years, my senior, becomes my external hoist. Midnight in the Australian suburbs is a special kind of silence. It is when the systemic ego collapse finally hits the floor. I wasn't just weeping. I was mourning a decade of metabolic neglect and the total bankruptcy of my self-governance. Sarah didn't offer a lecture. She didn't mention the kilos I'd put on or the embarrassing footy incident in the backyard. She simply provided a bridge to a new architecture of being. You need help, Chris. Walking in, I felt the immediate shift in neurospatial design. No fluorescent triggers or clinical sterility. Just spotted gum timber, and this was a space built for parasympathetic downregulation. Dr. Yamamoto didn't look at my chart first. He scanned my kinetic signature. He saw the tension in my traps, and the way I was bracing for an impact that wasn't coming. He was the anchor my frantic nervous system required. I told him about the neighbor hauling me up like a fallen steer while my boy watched. I confessed the total exhaustion of my existence, the weight, the lies, the structural decay. I laid my internal infrastructure bare. I was bracing for the metabolic penance. I expected a regime of cortisol-spiking sprints in the rain and a diet of bland kilos of steamed broccoli. I was ready for the self-inflicted violence we usually call getting back on track. Dr. Yamamoto didn't hand me a workout schedule. He simply poured a cup of green tea, the steam rising in a steady ribbon, and asked, "How many times have you attempted to reboot your architecture, only for the system to crash before the month is out?" I had to admit the cycle. 2 weeks of grit, then total collapse. He just nodded. "You tried to win a 40-year war of attrition in 2 months. That's not discipline, Christopher. That's a homeostatic coup. Modern culture demands we attack ourselves. We're fed a diet of aggressive optimization become unstoppable by Monday. It's a doctrine of systemic self-immolation disguised as self-improvement. But your nervous system does not trust violence. It perceives a sudden overhaul as a hostile threat. Real, lasting recalibration is incredibly quiet. It is the slow, rhythmic persistence of a stream carving through stone. He didn't hand me a barbell or a meal plan, just a glass of Sydney tap water. "Every morning," he said, "before the warehouse shift, before the chaos of the suburban morning, 1 glass. That is your entire neural protocol." I felt insulted. I'm 50 kilos overweight. My knees scream after 5 minutes of backyard footy, and my life is a dumpster fire behind a Woolies. I expected a war, and he gave me a sip of water. I wanted to walk out right then. Yamamoto didn't blink. "Stop looking at the hydration. This is about self-contract integrity. You've spent a decade lying to your nervous system. This glass is the first promise you aren't allowed to break. We are rebuilding your internal authority from zero." It hit me like a physical weight. I didn't just have bad habits. I had a massive compound internal debt. Every New Year's resolution, every "tomorrow I'll start" at the letterbox, they weren't just failures. They were hard evidence I'd gathered against my own character. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger I couldn't trust. That's the identity lock-in. When you break your word enough times, your brain stops seeing failure and starts seeing nature. You don't think you're failing. You just think you're weak. 5 a.m. The sun hasn't even hit the hills yet. It's freezing in the kitchen, but here we are. This isn't just hydration. It's a neural handshake. I'm telling my brain that the old Christopher, the one who slept through his alarms and his life, is officially being evicted. Day 2, Day 5, Day 7. We're moving past the novelty phase into identity priming. Most blokes wait for motivation to strike like lightning, but we're building a battery. Repetition is the only language the subconscious speaks fluently. The behavior is becoming the biology. Look at the water. People mistake discipline for a high-intensity burn, like a grand final sprint. It's not. It's somatic blueprinting. It's your nervous system finally remembering who you are becoming instead of mourning who you used to be. Consistency is the highest form of self-respect. Yamamoto calls it Kaizen. In the warehouse, we call it getting the job done. It's the compound character interest. You don't overhaul a life in a weekend. You dismantle the failure. Cycles through microscopic, non-negotiable wins. If you can control the first 4 ounces of your day, you can control the world. Dinner time. Usually, I'd inhale 3 serves of Mum's roast without thinking. Tonight, I'm implementing a cognitive buffer, a half portion. Not because I'm starving myself, but because I'm reclaiming the space between impulse and action. I'm no longer a passenger to my own cravings. I looked at the plate and finally performed the emotional decoupling. I wasn't hungry. I was just using the meal as an emotional sedative to downregulate the cortisol from a 10-hour warehouse shift. I wasn't feeding my stomach. I was trying to numb the loneliness vector. Enter the 20-meter protocol, a microlocomotion habit so small it bypasses the amygdala's resistance. A walk to the letterbox and back. No kit, no kilos to shed yet, just a simple neural tethering to the morning air. On the third sunrise, the protocol triggered relational resonance. My daughter, still in her pajamas, grabbed my hand. We weren't just checking the mail, we were co-authoring a new family script of presence. The golden hour hit my face, and I realized discipline isn't an algorithmic optimization or a penance for your past behavior. It is an authentic reclamation. It's the quiet act of returning to your own life after a long, cold absence. Months of consistency led to somatic restructuring. The kilos dropped, sure, but look at the spine. I'm no longer hunched over like a man defeated by the suburban grind. I am an internal sovereign, standing tall in my own front yard. The humidity is a physical weight. The smell of charred snags and heavy potato salad fills the air. My uncle slaps a beer into my hand, shouting over the cricket on the telly. Go on, Chris. Live a little, mate. One plate won't undo a year of salads. The social pressure is a cognitive overload. The internal sovereign is being sieged by the good bloke archetype. The dopamine spike was a deception. Now, the metabolic crash hits. I'm staring at the bathroom mirror, the fluorescent light exposing every flaw. The old toxic script is looping in my prefrontal cortex. You're a fraud. You're just a fat kid playing dress up in a disciplined man's skin. The internal sovereign has been deposed by the glutton. Dr. Yamamoto's voice cuts through the static. Wabi-sabi, Christopher. There is a profound beauty in the broken and the repaired. A bowl mended with gold is stronger than one that never cracked. Your discipline is not a glass vase. It is a muscle that grows through the micro tears of failure. I exhale the shame. Long-term consistency isn't a tightrope walk where one slip ends the journey. It's a navigation. If the ship veers off course, you don't burn the vessel, you simply adjust the rudder. I am not my lapse. I am the man who returns. The recalibration begins now, 5 a.m. The magpies are the only ones awake. I drink the first liter of water. The world thinks strength is never falling, but that's just ego. True sovereignty is the ability to de-identify from failure. Yesterday was a data point. Today is the protocol. One drop at a time, the empire is rebuilt. True metabolic sovereignty isn't merely about the number on the scale. It's the capacity to sprint through the kikuyu grass for a specky, breathless, only from the joy of the game, not the physiological burden of your past. You aren't just playing footy, you're reclaiming your seat at the table of life. When you recalibrate your internal state, you reset the emotional thermostat of your entire household. Discipline is a silent broadcast. It's the architecture of a new sanctuary. You're not just changing your behavior, you're restoring a father and a husband to his rightful frequency. 2 years of microadjustments, 50 kilos shed, but that's secondary. The real victory is identity cohesion. Your internal credit score is finally in the green because you have regained the ability to trust your own word. You are no longer a stranger to yourself. Authentic discipline is a subperceptual phenomenon. It's the invisible ritual performed in the dark, the choice to go to bed early without a social media announcement. It doesn't crave a good on ya or a public accolade. It is the quiet power of a promise kept to an audience of one. Stop waiting for a massive overhaul. That's just a distraction from the work. Tonight, execute one microscopic pact, a single glass of water, a single minute of silence. Prove you are capable of the return, and watch yourself become someone entirely new, one drop at a time.